Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's Daf Pesachim Daf Ayin Vav. We're at the last line of Ayin Hammer Beis. Itzmar says the Gemara, we learned Cham l'Seicham. Suppose you have two items, both of which are hot. Rashi says, on the bottom line, Cham l'Seicham. Basar Reiseach l'Seich Cholav Reiseach. You have hot meat, which falls into hot milk. Basar v'cholav. Oi, so that's one option. Or, Echad shel Isser, Echad shel Heter. One of them happens to be Asr, one Mutter. Says the Gemara, Cham l'Seicham, what happens then? When both items are hot. Divrei HaKoil Asr, all agree that it's Asr. Why is it Asr? Says Rashi up on top. Asr de bala heter mi Isser, because the heter absorbed flavor and taste from the Isser. Since they're both hot, heat accelerates the exchange and absorption of flavor. There's a blia that occurred from the Isser to the heter. On the case of the basar in the chalav, they both exchange flavors with each other. You now have a joint combined entity called basar b'chalav. That's because they were both hot. Continues the Gemara. What about tzoinin l'seich tzoinin? Cold fell into cold. Then there's no concern, because when there's no heat present, then there's no blia. Divrei kol mutter, all agree. There's no machlokes that it's mutter. There's no heat equals no absorption. So all you need to do is rinse it off, and it's good. What about cham l'teich tzoinin? One item is hot, the other is cold, and the hot fell into the cold. V'tzoinin l'teich cham. Or in the reverse, cold fell into hot. Now we have a machlokes. Rabbi Amar, ilo ogavar, the upper one prevails. The upper one has the upper hand. Ushmol Amar tato ogavar. Shmuel says just the opposite. It's the lower one, the one which is stationary. That's the one that's gavar, prevails and sets the tone. What does this mean? Let's take a look at Rashi again. Up on top. Ilo ogavar. This is Rav, who holds ha'elyoy neitzeach. The one that's on top, falling into the low one, he's the one that prevails. It's the movement, it's the added energy, the velocity, the fact that he's crashing into the bottom one, that added energy, that speed, that added koyach has an effect on the bottom one. Ha'elyoy neitzeach, so the upper one wins. Hilkach. Therefore, cham l'teich tzoinin asr. If you have hot that falls into cold, it's asr because the upper one was hot. She'elyon mechamim v'letachton, because the upper one has an effect, a heating effect on the lower one. Harishnein chamim. If someone heats up the bottom one as it enters with force, generating some heat there and imparting its own heat into the item on bottom, creating an exchange of heat and flavor, ubali mi'adadi, and they absorb from each other. So the heter was balei from the Isser. That's when you have cham l'teich tzoinin. The upper one was hot. That sets the tone. V'tzoinin l'teich cham. In the other case where it was cold falling into hot, then it's mutter. Why? She'elyon mitzanin l'tachton. Because the upper one, which is cold, will cool off the bottom one. The fact that he's falling into it, that added energy, that movement, will cause it to be menatzech, to win over, and transmit some of its coldness to the bottom one, cool off the bottom one, v'lei bali, and there's no exchange of heat and no exchange of flavors. That's Rav Shita, the elyon, the upper one prevails. Continues Rashi, Ushmul Amar tato ogavar. It's actually the lower one, which is sitting in its own place, in its own environment, it's stationary. That sets the tone. Hilkach. Therefore, you have in the reverse. Cham l'teich tzoinin mutter. Hot falls into cold, it's mutter. Because the cold one on bottom sets the tone and cools off the upper one that falls into it. The host cools off its guest. V'tzoinin l'teich cham asr. If you have cold falling into hot, then since the stationary one, the one that was immobile, in place, was hot, that prevails, that sets the tone, and it has a heating effect on the newcomer, which facilitates exchange of flavor and tam and blios, and makes the heter asur. Who's Rashi? So who does the halacha follow? Generally, we know that when it comes to Yisur, we follow Rav. When he has a machlokes with Shmuel. In this case, however, Hilchas is Shmuel, we follow Shmuel. Tanya, Tarti Masnisa, Kavasel, come on. Later on, we're going to have two brises in support of Shmuel. That Tato Agovar, it's the lower one that prevails. The Gemara will now ask three kashas on Shmuel from our Mishnah. First, says the Gemara on the third line from the top, Tanan, haven't we learned in our Mishnah? Not of miroit falacheres. We know that a korban pesach is meant to be roasted through heat of a fire, directly exposed to fire, tzliesh. What happens if the roitev, if the gravy of the korban pesach drips down on the cheres wall of the oven? V'chazar elav, and then that roitev, that fat, bounces back, returns to the korban pesach, and gets absorbed. Yitos mekayma, you have to remove the upper layer, because the roitev is puzzle. Let's analyze this case. Kasal kadaitach, the Gemara at this point figures, becheres tzinenes, we're speaking about a cool oven. Bishleim l'Rav, now according to Rav, we understand the halacha. Because he holds the Amar, ilo agavar, it's the upper one that prevails. Which one is the upper one? The korban pesach, which dripped down onto that oven. That's why you have to remove the upper layer. The other roitev. Why? Because the roitev went along. It dripped onto the cheres. Now the roitev is hot. It heats up the cheres when it comes into contact with it. Which in turn creates an exchange here. The cheres will in turn add some heat to the roitev. The roitev heats up the cheres, which in turn heats up the roitev a bit. So the roitev received some heat from the cheres. That's problematic. The roitev is part of the korban pesach. This is not sliesh, this is heat other than fire heat. When the roitev returns to the pesach, komatvi pesach. Taisus explains, pesach here means the roitev. So the roitev was komatvi, it was roasted, machmas chamimusa de cheres, as a result of the heat coming from the cheres. That's not sliesh. You have gravy which was heated via the wall of the oven. Rachman Omar, doesn't the Torah say it's sliesh, v'lo tzli machmas davar acher? It needs to be sliesh, not tzli on account of something else. So according to Rab, we understand why this roitev is possible. Again, we're speaking ilo agavar. The upper one sets the tone. The upper one carries more weight, so to speak. The upper one here is the roitev. It drips down on the cheres. The roitev is hot. It's going to heat up the cheres when it lands on the cheres, which in turn will heat up that roitev. Now we have gravy which was heated by a wall of that oven. That's why it's possible. However, according to Shmuel, it says the lower one, the one that's in place, in this case it's the wall of the oven, that prevails. That wins over. What's the problem? Cheres, even the tzoinenu. The cheres, since he's cold, akuri maker leila roitev. When this hot roitev drips down on the cold cheres on bottom, the cheres has a cooling effect on that roitev, because the cheres is stationary. He's setting the tone. He's creating that environment. So what's the problem? The roitev drips down, comes back into the korban pesach. You have to remove the layer. What's wrong with this roitev? He wasn't heated through the cheres. In fact, the cheres cooled him off. As Rabbi Shmuel will tell us soon. Over there, we're speaking about hot cereal. The roitev dripped into hot cooking cereal. Hachanami here as well, when it comes to the wall of the oven. We're not speaking about a cold oven. We're speaking about an oven which is stifling hot. It's hot in there. And the wall is very hot. So it's not the bottom which is tzoinen. You don't have a tato which is tzoinen. The gravy is hot, and so is the wall on which it landed. That wall is hot. And since it's on bottom, it will create a heating effect on the roitev who drips on it. will warm up the roitiv, which now is no longer tzli machmasesh. So we had a kasha, and we answered the kasha on Shmuel. We're speaking rather than a cold cheres, it's going to be a hot cheres. Tnan, let's ask another kasha for the next case in the Mishnah. Not of roit fell soilus. Some of the roitev of the Pesach dripped down on some soilus cereal there, which was in the oven. You have to scoop out. Why? Because the roitev that falls into the soilus was cooked through the soilus. It's not sliesh. Let's analyze the case. Because the Gemara figures once again, but soilus tzinenes. We're speaking about cold soilus. Bishlemi Rav. Now, according to Rav, we understand the problem. The Amar Ila Agavar, he says the upper one sets the tone. Which one is the upper one? The Korban Pesach, which is with its roitiv, which is hot. That's the one situated above the soilus. He prevails. He sets the tone. He heats up the soilus in which he will land. Bishlem Rav Dama Ila Gavar, who says the upper one wins. That's why you have to scoop it out. The roitiv that lands inside that soilus is parcel. Why? The meratech lo l'soilus. Because first, the hot gravy will heat up the soilus in which it landed, because he's the upper one, and he heats up the lower one. The hadar hadrani, he will heat up the soilus, the hadar hadrani, the cereal which surrounds the place where the gravy dripped in. So that's number one. Once the soilus has been heated by this roitiv, it's going to have a reverse effect as well. The soilus will turn around and heat up, add an element of heat in this roitiv. Oh, now we have a roitiv which was heated through heat, other than tzliesh. The komatvi roitiv, the roitiv has been roasted and heated, machmas chamimusa the soilus, through the heat coming from the soilus. That's a problem. Rachmana Amar tzliesh. You'd have tzliesh. It can't be roasted and cooked using heat other than direct fire heat. According to Rav, we understand this halach. Elul Shmuel, but once again, according to Shmuel, we have some difficulty. The Shmuel Dama Tato Gavar, who maintains the lower one, prevails. What's the problem? Soilus, given the tzinenesi, we're assuming that the soilus is cold. Akurika makerle. When the gravy drips in, what's going to happen? The gravy won't warm up the soilus, just the opposite. The soilus, which is cold, which is on bottom, which is stationary, will cool off the gravy. What's the problem? Why do you need to scoop it out? Say we have Rabbi Yehuda. Rather than speaking about cold soilus, we're speaking about soilus resachas, hot, burning hot soilus, in the midst of cooking. So the gravy which falls into the soilus will actually get heated through the soilus. Roitev, which was heated from soilus, is not sliesh. And that explains the halach in the Mishnah. Let's proceed to the next case in the Mishnah. Tanan, socher b'shem ashal truma. If he smeared some truma oil on the Korban Pesach, im chaburas kahanim yechil. If we have a group of kahanim, no problem, let them eat it. Im shal Yisrael. However, if the members are Yisraelim, who cannot consume truma, im chayu. If the Pesach is still raw, no problem. Just rinse off the shem. Im tzliu, if it was already roasted, yiklev es achitzan. Then you have to remove the upper layer, because the Korban Pesach, which had been roasted, is already somewhat absorbent, and the oil will penetrate somewhat into the upper layer. You have to remove that before consuming. Now, according to Rav, we understand this halach. L'Rav the Amar Ilo Gavar, who says the upper one prevails. Which one is the upper one here? The oil, which is cool. Amate lahachi, that's why sagale beklifa. Klifa, peeling off, is sufficient. Because the upper one, the oil, is cold. It won't permeate the entire animal. It will remain relatively at the surface. So klifa is enough. According to Shmuel, the lower one wins. Even the Chamu, the Gemara is assuming that we're speaking even about a hot Korban Pesach after roasting. It's hot. And that's the lower one. You're putting the oil onto the Korban Pesach, which is hot. The Korban Pesach sets the tone. Mivla bala, it's going to absorb the shemen, which will permeate the entire carbon due to the intense heat present in this carbon. Amai sogale beklifa. Why is klifa enough? The upper layer, that's not enough. Nitzel legam, the entire thing should be asa. Because it was beileya throughout the entire behema, which is hot. Shani sicha. Sicha is different. Smearing is different. The mashu ba'al mahud avida. It would only be done in small measures. They would just smear a thin layer of oil, and that wasn't sufficient to penetrate and permeate the entire animal. We assume it remained relatively at the surface, and therefore, even according to Shmuel, that tato govar, we have a hot tato, a hot base. The shemen is presumed to have remained at the surface. So at this point, we have three kashas on Shmuel from our Mishnah, which were all answered. Now come the two brises, which Rashi referred to earlier as being supportive of Shmuel's shita that tato govar. Tanikav said the Shmuel. The brise says cham l'seicham aser. Hot falls into hot. Heat accelerates the absorption of our flavor and tam, and we assume the Isser transmitted his flavor to the heter and to us. Likewise, if cold was put into hot, since the bottom one is hot, we're following Shmuel, so right to Shmuel. Aser, we assume that there was a transmission of flavor. However, hot falls into cold. Or cold into cold, then there's no concern. Madiach, just give it a rinse and you're okay. So this will be a right to Shmuel, that the lower item sets the tone. Then we'll try to analyze the brisa now. You say cham l'tich tzoinin madiach, hot falls into cold, the tato is govar, and just give it a rinse. Fine, I understand that there was no serious significant blia, because the bottom one was cold, and it had a cooling effect on his guest. But we still have a problem. Kivan dechamu. But since the item that fell in, the upper item, was hot, wouldn't it take a while for it to cool off? Ademakerle. By the time the lower cold item got around to cooling off the upper item that entered its domain, it took a while. We have to assume that it can't be that there was no blia at all. Meaning at that moment of entry, at that moment of contact, we have to assume that the top item, which was hot, burning hot, did have some sort of heating effect, at least on the surface, at the point of contact, which facilitated a blia, exchange of flavor. Sure, very quickly the item got cooled off by the tato, which was cold, but it takes a while. It takes a millisecond for that to happen. Klifa meal in the body, which should still require some sort of peeling off, removal of that first surface. So why is just rinsing enough? Ella Ema says the Mori right. Let's say like this. The Brisa means when hot falls into cold, koilif. You need to peel off that first layer, which was balea inevitably. If it's cold into cold, where this concern doesn't exist whatsoever, it's cold and cold, madiach, just give it a rinse. Tani idach, we have another brisa as well in support of Shmuel. Basar reseach shenafal l'toich cholav reseach, hot meat fell into cold milk. V'chein tzoinin shenafal teicham, likewise cold fell into hot. Since the bottom one is hot, asur, because the bottom one sets the tone. However, cham l'tech tzoinin, if hot fell into cold, v'tzoinin l'tech tzoinin, or cold into cold madiach, he just gives it a rinse. Once again, the Gemara has the same kasha, cham l'tech tzoinin madiach, hot into cold, you just give it a rinse. How does that suffice? Given the chamu, since the upper item was hot, ademakerle, by the time the bottom one got around to cooling him off, you can't say there was no blia at all. You certainly have to assume that at the moment of contact, the hot one did affect the bottom one. There was some sort of exchange of heat and of flavors. Klifa mini bay, which requires some sort of surface removal. Ela rather say like this: Chamatech tzoyin, if hot falls into cold, koila, if he removes the top layer, because there was some sort of minute amount of blia When it's cold into cold, in that case, no concern whatsoever. All he needs to do is rinse it. So you have two brises in support of Shmuel, that Tata Agavar. Continues the Gemara. Amar, we just said, cold into cold, he just gives it a rinse. Amar Rav Huna, Lo Shanu. This halacha, that cold doesn't involve any concern, is only El Shloi Malcha. If he hadn't excessively salted that item. Aval Milchai, but if he excessively salted it, Asr, then something which was excessively salted is considered as though it's boiling hot, because the salting has that heating effect, which is equated with heat coming from a fire. So we have to treat it like something which is hot, and we apply the halachas of Cham to this case as well. The Amar Shmuel, Maliach Harikuraseach, something which was heavily salted, is considered as though it is boiling hot. Kavush Harikumavushal, something which was preserved in vinegar. If you have a basar and chalav, or you have isser and heta, which was preserved in vinegar, it's as though they're cooked together, because the vinegar and the kavisha, this pickling process, facilitates the exchange of flavor. It's as though they were cooked together. Amarav, Hadam Shmuel, this is what Shmuel just told us, Maliach Harikuraseach, salted it as though it is cooking. Wayamaran el shloi nechal machas milcha. That's only said when it's loy nechal machmas milcha, it's been so heavily salted that you can't really eat it. It's not really edible at this point until you rinse it. So this level of salting is equated with cooking. Aval nechal machas milcha, but if it can be eaten and this salting is not so excessive, why then we don't consider it to be kireseach. Continues the Gemara. Hahu bar goizah, there was this young bird, the nafal lekada de kimcha. A cold bird was dropped into a pitcher of kimcha. This is the kutach dip we had earlier in the Masechta, the milky, salty dip. What is the halach? It's cold into cold. Sharia. Rav Chidana Brei de Rava mi Parshunya. Rav Chidana, the son of Rava from Parshunya, allowed it to be eaten. Why? It's cold into cold. Just give it a rinse and you're okay. Amar Rava Mancha, he was impressed. He said, Manchachim, who is so smart? Lemishra milsa kiha, to be mata, this type of thing. Ilav, if not for this great man, Rav Chidana Brei de Rava mi Parshunya, the Gavar Rabbi is a great man. So why would he allow it? Amalach. What was his reason for allowing it? The dip, the kutach is salty. Why is it considered like tzoynim? Because Kiyam or Shmuel, he knew that when Shmuel said his halacha, Maliach Harikuraseach, something which is salted, is considered as though it's boiling hot. That's only when it's excessively salted. She'ei nechal machmas milcha. It's inedible on account of its salt. Hai nechal machmas milcha, but this kutach is perfectly edible, despite the fact that it has high salt content. You use it as a dip on a daily basis. Therefore, it's considered like tzoynin, and something which falls into it is treated like tzoynin tzoynin. Continues the Gemara. Getting back to this bird, v'hani milichai. We only consider it tzoynin, and rinsing off is sufficient if it is chai, it's raw. Aval tzli, but if it's been roasted, in which case it's somewhat absorbent. Boy klifa, you have to remove the upper layer of the bird. And this that we say that removal of the layer is sufficient, klifa is enough, that's only said el de les be pili, when there are no cracks in this bird. Aval is be pili, but if there are cracks present, it's roasted and it has cracks. Also, the entire bird is also because we assume that the milk has permeated the entire bird. V'imatu b'tavi, likewise, if it was roasted and also seasoned, in which case it's been softened and now it's really highly absorbent. Also here as well, we assume that the milk was absorbed throughout the entire bird, in which case klifa, removal of the upper layer, is not sufficient. The entire bird is now asur. So in conclusion, we learned about different cases of taroivis isavehet. And we have 4 examples. Tzoynin l'tech, tzoynin, cold fell into cold. All agreed. There's no concern about absorbing tam. There's no blia. It's when it's cold. All you need to do is rinse it off and you're good to go. The Gemara concluded, however, if we're dealing with something which was roasted, then you need to remove the upper layer. Klifa is required. If it's roasted and has cracks, or roasted and was also seasoned, in which case it's highly absorbent, the entire item would be asur. If cham falls into cham, all agree that heat present will facilitate the exchange of bliyos, and we assume the Isser transmitted his flavor into the heter. Now, if there's one item which is hot and the other one cold, then we have a machlekes. Cham that fell into tzoyin, in which case the upper one was hot. Rav says it's aser, since the upper one which came striking into the lower one affected the lower one, warmed it up, and there was an exchange of bliyos. Shmuel says we're not concerned about serious bliyos here because the lower one sets the tone. However, the Gemara tells us, even according to Shmuel, you need to do klifa, you need to remove at least the layer, the point of contact, because it takes a while for the lower one to cool off the upper one, which entered within it. So during that first moment, there was some sort of exchange of heat and bliyos. Klifa is required. In the reverse case, where a tzoyin fell into a cham, Rav says, all you need to do is klifa, because since the upper one was tzoyin, he prevails, he has the upper hand, and cools off the lower one upon entry. However, klifa is required, somewhat of a removal of the upper layer, since at the moment of contact, we're concerned that there was some sort of exchange of heat and bliyos. According to Shmuel in this case, it's completely also because tato or gover, it's the item which is stationary in place, which prevails and sets the tone. In this case, it's the hot one on bottom, which will warm up and heat up the tzoyin which entered within it, and there will be an exchange of bliyos. The Gemara concluded, even maliach, something which was excessively salted, is considered kiroi seach. Continues the Gemara. Now we discussed the halachas of bliyos. What about reyach? Just smell. Omar Rav, basar shchuta. We have a piece of meat which is kosher meat. Meat coming from an animal which was nishchat. Basar shchuta shaman, fatty piece of kosher meat. Shetzolai in basar nevela, kachash, which he roasted together in the same oven with a piece of meat, nevela meat, which is aser, kachash, which was lean meat, non-fat meat. Aser. We say that the kosher meat now is aser. Why? My timer. Mefatmi mihadadi. They feed off each other. They fatten each other. Let's see Rashi on top. Basar shchuta sheshamen shetzolai. B'tana, he took this fatty piece of kosher meat, roasted it together in the same oven. Of course, b'shnei shvudin, zerach mizeh, each one in its own spit, at a distance from each other. Still, we say it's aser. Why? Shehareach min hashamen, the scent, the smell, the reach here, not the substance, the reich of the fat left the kosher meat, and it went into the nevela meat. Nichnas the kochash, went into the lean nevela meat, which now absorbed the fat which was sent over by the kosher meat. Umefatmai, this fat which was now absorbed in the nevela meat, fattened the nevela meat, and now it has the ability to give off its own reach. V'choizer zeh umoitzi reach gamhu. Now that he's fatty, full of grease and fat, he now has the ability to send out his flavor, his reach, which was absorbed by the shchuta. That's what Rav says, the shchuta is aser. So although there were two stages here, the basar kosher gave off his own fat, which was absorbed in the nevela. Now the nevela turned around and used that grease, that fat, to send out his own reach, which was directed at the basar shchuta. Once the basar shchuta absorbed that, it became aser. The koshkin, says Rashi, certainly in a case where the shchuta is kusha. Originally the basar shachet was lean and absorbent. When nevela shmeina, and the nevela was fatty, in which case it's simple that it will be aser because the nevela sent off his reach directly to the shchuta, making it aser. Let's go back to the Gemara. Again, on the top line, basar shchuta shamen shetzolei and basar nevela kachash. We have a piece of kosher meat, fatty meat, roasted together with nevela, which happens to be a piece of lean meat. Aser, the shchuta now is aser, my time and mafatim adadi, because they fatten off each other, they feed off each other. That's Rav Shita. Apparently he holds that even reach, which is not really the essence and substance of the iser, even reach is considered aser. V'Levi Amar, he says quite the opposite. Afilu basar shchuta kachash. Even if you have a piece of kosher meat which is kachash, weak and lean, shetzalai im basar nevela shaman, which he roasted together with a piece of nevela which was shaman, full of fat, mutter. Why? My timer. Reicha ba'amu. It's not essence, it's not substance of it, it's just a reach, it's just a scent and the smell and the odor. For reicha lav milsi, that doesn't have to be reckoned with. In fact, says the Gemara, Avoid Levi Uvda, he actually paskin the shaila and was matir when the question was presented to him. Bei Reish Galusa, a story that happened in the home of Reish Galusa, which occurred with a big D, with a goat, which was roasted together, v'davacha, together with a swine, with a pig. And he was matir because he held that reichel av milsa, odor, scent, is not reckoned with. Meisvei, says the Gemara, let's ask a kasha on the shita of Levi. So Levi was the one who says that reich is nothing. The Brisa says, Ein soilin shnei pesachim ke'echad. We know that a Pesach is designated to be eaten by the members, the Menuyim, the Bnei Chabura, exclusively. You're not meant to take part in somebody else's Korban Pesach. Therefore, says the Brisa, you're not meant to be tzoila shnei pesachim ke'echad. Two animals, two Korban Pesachs together in the same oven. We're concerned about them getting mixed up and exchanged. My love, should we not assume the concern here is taribes tamim, on account of the exchange of flavors, smells, scents, reach. We're concerned that the reich of the other carbon, which doesn't belong to you, is going to enter and be absorbed into your carbon, in which case you're going to be eating a carbon which is not designated for you. The kasha Levi, it's a kasha on Levi. Levi doesn't seem to be concerned about reich. Well, he says the Gemara, that's not the concern. We're concerned about the actual animals themselves getting mixed up. The reich wouldn't be a concern. We're concerned that you might pick up the wrong carbon and eat it. It seems that this is the correct approach, that the concern is on account of mix-up of the actual animals, not on account of the reich getting mixed up. Why? But the Tani Sefer, because take a look at the next part of the Bryce. Don't roast together two animals. Afilu gdiva tala, even a goat and a lamb, which are very dissimilar in appearance. Still, we're concerned that perhaps in their haste they might pick up the wrong animal. Now, iyamas b'shleima, this works well. This added chiddush, that even a gdiva tala poses a concern. The fact that the Bryce had to mention that, this works well if you say mipnei gufen. The concern was confusing and mixing up the actual animals. Hainu d'tani afilu gdiva tala. That's what the Bryce adds. Well, you meant to know even the gdiva tala, which are different and dissimilar in their appearance, was still concerned perhaps they might get mixed up. That works if the concern is on account of confusing the animals. But if the concern would have been on account of the exchange of the tam, the reach, mali gdiva tala. What difference does it make if we're dealing with a gdi and a tala, mali gdiva gdi, or we're dealing with a gdi and another gdi? Why is the Bryce adding it as a chiddush? If the concern is on account of the reach getting mixed up, the same concern that applies to a gdi v'gdi applies to a gdi v'tala. Why is there an added chiddush? Well, even a gdi v'tala don't roast together. Oh, Elamai, apparently, says the Gemara, this was a proof that the concern is on account of confusing the animals themselves. And then the chiddush is, well, even a gdi v'tala, which appear different, you should still be careful because they might still get confused. Elamai. So what do you mean to say? Al karchach v'pnei tareves gufnu de'asr. That the concern of the Bryce is because of the confusion of the guf. And that's why there's an added chiddush with the gdiva tala, right? So we can infer from here, make a diak. Aval tareves tamim shari. Apparently, there's no concern about mixing up the tam. You see very clearly that the Bryce is not concerned with that issue. We're strictly concerned about confusing the animals. And that's why we added, well, even a gdiva tala, which don't look alike, be careful. So the concern is strictly on account of confusing the animal, not the tam. Lema tavat yufta d'Rav. Perhaps now, instead of it being a kasha on Levi, which it's not, it's actually going to be a kasha on Rav. Rav is the one who said that reach is something to be concerned about. It sounds pretty clear from this Bryce that we're not concerned about reich. We're concerned strictly about mixing up the animals. Reich, that poses no concern whatsoever. Omar Rabbi Yirmiyah, says Rabbi Yirmiyah, perhaps generally speaking, we are concerned about reach. Hachab ma'askiram. The Brisa here is speaking about a case where there is no concern about mixing up the reach. Why? He roasted each korban pesach in its own pot. He roasted them in two separate pots, in which case there's no mix-up of reach, because they're each one is in its own contained entity. Says the Gemara, do you mean really within pots? You're not meant to cook a korban pesach. Ella Ema rather say like this: they were separate, as though they would have been in separate pots. Rashi explains there was a pile of ash or coals in between them, which created that partition, and therefore there's no concern about the reach being transmitted from one to the other. V'hachi ka'amar, and this is what the Brisa means to say: Ein tzeilin shnei pesachim ke'echad. Don't mix together, don't roast two karbonis pesach in one oven. B'pnei taroives, we're concerned about taroives. My taroives, what mix-up are we concerned about? Taroives tamim. Yeah, the concern is on account of the reach, which travels from one to the other. In which case, as we explained, if the reich of korban pesach B will end up in my korban pesach A, I won't be able to eat it because I can only eat my korban, not the other one. So that's the initial part of the Brisa. We're concerned, about tarevis of time in line with Rav's sheet. Va'afilu ke'ein shtei kederis, and the Brisa continues. Well, even when you don't have a concern about the reich traveling, because they were roasted separately, ke'ein shtei kederis, as though they were in two separate pots, meaning there was some sort of partition. The lake of tarevis tam, in which case there's no concern about the mixing up of the flavors. Even then, says the Brisa, and continues and says, Asur mishum tarevis gufen. Then we have another concern. True, there's no exchange of tam, but there's a concern about mixing up the actual guf of the carbon. And on that concern, the Brisa says, Va'afilu gdivatoli, meant to know that even a gdivatoli, which are so dissimilar, still we're concerned that perhaps in their frenzy, they'll pick up the wrong animal. So according to this interpretation of the Brisa is indeed concerned about both confusions. Tarev is tam, because even the reich poses a concern like Rav Shita, and also regarding tarevis of the guf of the carbon. Continues the Gemara, Omar Rav Morik Tanoi. Actually, it seems that this machlokes between Rav, who says reicha milsa, and Levi, who says reicha lav milsa, is actually consistent with the machlokes Tanoim found elsewhere. The Mishnah in Truma, he says like this: Haroide pascham. If one takes out a hot loaf of bread from the oven, and placed it on top of a barrel filled with truma wine, we're concerned that the hot loaf will suck in some of the reich of the truma wine. Could it be eaten by a non-kohen? Ramei Oyser, no, because the reich coming from the wine into the bread makes it aser to a non-kohen. Reicha milsa. Rabbi Yehuda Mater, he says we're not concerned. Rabbi Yossi, he says it depends what the bread is made of. Mater b'shel chitin. If it's made of wheat, he allows, because that's not really highly absorbent and won't really suck in the reich of the yain. But if we're speaking about a loaf of bread made of barley, which is more absorbent and will suck in the reich, then it's aser b'pnei shasorim shoyaves, because barley shoyav draws the reich of yain. So we have three shittas. We have Rabbi Meir, who seems to hold that reich is something to be reckoned with. Rabbi Yossi as well holds, in principle, reich is something to be reckoned with. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda seems to hold, is not concerned about reich. My love Tanoi, should we not assume that this question here is based on a machlokes Tanoi? The Mar Savar reich alav milsahi. Rabbi Yehuda seems to hold that reich is something not to be concerned about. Umar Savar, however, Rabbi Meir and likewise Rabbi Yossi hold reicha milsi. Reicha is something to be reckoned with, and it's a machlokes Tanoi. Says the word, not necessarily. The Levi, because according to Levi, vadai Tanoi, it's certainly a machlokes Tanoi. Levi, who holds that reich is not something to be reckoned with, cannot be compatible with Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi, who say very clearly, we're concerned about reach. So according to him, you certainly have to say it's a machlekes tanoim. Rabbi Yossi hold reach is milsahi, whereas Rabbi Yehuda holds reach is not something to reckon with. And Levi follows Rabbi Yehuda's shita. However, the Rav who said that reach is something important, Neima Tanoi, do we really have to say that it's a machlekes tanoim? Or perhaps can we work it out otherwise? Or Malach Rav will respond, no, it's not necessarily machlekes tanoim. The Kuli Alma, perhaps all agree, all three shitas, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi hold reich milsei. Reich is something important. Why then does Rabbi Yehuda say that there's no concern here? That's because we're speaking about a very specific case where Rabbi Yehuda holds the reich was not absorbed into the loaf of bread. But generally speaking, reich is something important. Lav itmar Allah dahi. Haven't we learned a pshat on that Mishnah that was speaking about a very unique case? Omar Rabba, Babar Chan, Omar Shlakish. Bepas chama v'chavetz psucha. When we're dealing with a case of pas chama, hot loaf of bread, sitting on top of a chavetz psucha, an open, exposed barrel of wine, in which case you have the heat drawing the reich, you have an exposed barrel of wine which transmits its reich freely. All agree. Even Rabbi Yehuda would agree that it's asa on account of that reich, which is important. Conversely, if you have a cold loaf of bread, a cooled off piece of bread, v'chavetz meguva sitting on a closed barrel, in which case you have two elements in favor. Number one, you don't have the heat drawing. Number two, the barrel is closed up, plugged up. All agree that it's mutter, there's no reach coming through. When do we have the machlekes that we just presented in the Mishnah? Suppose we only have one element. For instance, you have pas chama, hot bread, sitting on top of a chavis stuma, closed, plugged up barrel. So you have the heat of the loaf, but the barrel is plugged off. Or another example would be pas sinenes, a cold loaf of bread, v'chavis psucha, sitting on top of an open, exposed barrel. So you have the open barrel, but a cold piece of bread. So in either case, you have one element that facilitates the reach transmission and one element that stops it. So you have the machlekes. Rameir says, since you have one element that leads us to think that there was reich here, then it's us. What Rabbi says, you need to have two elements, hot and exposed the barrels. Otherwise, there's no reich coming through. So it's a very specific case that the machlekes is focusing on. But in our case, you have the two pieces of meat being roasted together in the same oven. All would agree that it's asur, because there was that transmission of reich. V'hanami, in our case as well. Kipas chama, v'chavetz psucha dami. It's as though you have a hot loaf of bread and an open and exposed barrel of wine. So in our case, when both pieces of meat are being roasted together in the same oven, they're exposed to each other, and certainly there's a transmission of reich, and all would agree, perhaps, that reicha milsahi. Continues the Gemara. Tani Rav Kahana, Brei, Rav China Saba. Rav Kahana, the son of China Saba, taught as follows: Pas she'afa im tzali b'taner. If he baked a loaf of bread together with meat that was being roasted in this oven, asur la'achla b'kutcha. We assume the reach from the meat was transmitted and absorbed into that loaf of bread, and he could no longer eat that bread with kutach, with this milky dip we discussed earlier, because the bread is deemed to be full of the meat flavor. Another example says the Gemara, Ahi binisa, there was this fish, the itva bahadi bisra, which was roasted in the same oven together with meat. And again, we assume that the fish now absorbed the reach of the meat. Asra rava miparzika. He didn't allow it to be eaten lemechla bekutcha, to eat this fish with kutach, with this milky dip. Once again, we assume the fish absorbed the reich of the basa. Apparently, they hold that reich is something to be reckoned with. Concludes the Gemara, Marbar Ravashi Amar. In this case, where a fish absorbed some of the reich of the meat, afilu milcha nami asura, that fish shouldn't be eaten at all, even with salt. refrain from eating that fish on account of sakana, mishum dekashil l'reicha, because it can lead to bad breath, uldavar achar, even to tzaras. It's dangerous to eat something which contains fish and meat together. We have to separate between the two. So, in conclusion, regarding the concept of reach, Rav says, reicha milsahi, you have to reckon with reach. Levi says, reicha lav milsahi, it's not the essence and substance of Isser, it's just a reach, just a scent and odor, has no significance. Tosfos points from this Gemara here, from the story at the end of the Gemara, that the halacha l'maisa is like Rav. The reich is something to be concerned with, but in fact, Tosfos says that if we have a distance, a harchaka between the two items, such as when we have a large-sized oven, and one item on one side, one on the other, then we saw that the reich just dissipates and gets diluted, and carries no significance, and is not asur on account of reicha milsa. Continues the Mishnah. Chamisha dvarim boin betuma ve'ena nechol betuma. There are 5 karbanos, public karbanos tzibur, which have to be eaten. Now, as we're going to see, even when the Yisrael matmeim, we still bring these karbanos. Any carbon which has a time designation will be brought even betuma. However, says the Mishnah, you bring it betuma, but you don't eat it when it was brought in a state of tum. Chamisha dvarim, the following 5 items, boin betum, although they're brought betuma when necessary, ve'ena nechol betuma. However, they're not eaten when they were brought betuma. What are the 5 items? Ha'omer, the Minchas Ha'omer brought on the 16th day of Nisan. Ushtei Alechem, the 2 lechem brought on Shavuos. V'lechem Apanim brought on a weekly basis. Zivchei Shalom Tzibor. Those kipsei atzeres, which are brought together with the Shtei Alechem. Us'irei Rashi Chadoshim, the S'irei Chatas and Rosh Chodesh. So these 5 items are Karbanos Tzibor, time sensitive. Even when they have to be brought betuma, they are brought. But the achila is not done when they are betuma. We have one exception. HaPesach. Sheba betuma, when a carbon Pesach needs to be brought betuma, suppose Yisrael with Tameh, they will bring the Pesach even betuma. In that case, not only is it brought betuma, but also nechel betuma. You eat it, even in a state of tuma. Why? Why is this different? Because the whole reason for bringing it initially was to eat it. Pasuk says, Ishlefli achle. The point of the carbon Pesach is for its consumption. So when the Torah says bring it betuma, apparently the Torah is allowing you to eat it betuma as well. Continues the Gemara, Chamish l'mutimai. The Mishnah gave us a comprehensive list of all those karbanos which can be brought betuma. Why the number? We can see it's 5. Chamisha l'mutimai. Evidently we're coming to exclude something. What is the number 5 coming to exclude from this category? L'muti chagigas chamisha asar. It's coming to be mamait, the chagiga, the carbon chagiga brought on the 15th day of Pesach. It's brought on Shavuos and Sukkot as well, just an example. That carbon, perhaps I would think that it is also going to be brought betuma when necessary. Perhaps I would think, given the carbon tzibu, since it's a public carbon, although each individual brings it, but it's brought collectively in tandem with the rest of Klal Yisrael, ukvil moed, and has a set time. Perhaps I would think that justifies bringing it betuma. Titchi tuma, it overrides tuma. That would be the Havamina. Kamash Malon. The Chiddush of the Mishnah is, no, only these 5 can be brought betuma, but not the Karban Chagiga. Given Islay Tashlumi Kol Shiva, since if you fail to bring it on the first day of Yom Tov, you still have time to make up. You can bring it throughout the entire Yom Tov, throughout the 7 days. Lo Dachi Shabbos, therefore it doesn't have the ability to override Shabbos. It's not something which is really so time sensitive, the Zman is not so crucial, and therefore it won't override Shabbos. And since it doesn't override Shabbos, likewise, l'dachya tuma, the same regarding tuma, it will not be brought with tuma, because they're both based on the same concept. Fine. Continues the Mishnah. We had a comprehensive list of all those karbanos which are time sensitive and will be brought with tuma. V'nisni nami seirei regalim. Why didn't the Mishnah also list another example? The seirei haregalim, the chatah, is brought on the Yom Tovim. Why isn't that included in the list? It's a time sensitive carbon brought with tuma. Says the Gemara, because the Mishnah already cited an example of an animal carbon brought betuma. The shlamim brought on Shavuos. So we don't have to get into other examples of a carbon brought betuma. If that's the case, then Siri Rosh Chodashim Nami. Why discuss the Siri Rosh Chodashim, which is another form of a carbon animal brought Betumah? For this very reason, because it already has an example of an animal carbon brought Betumah. This is Zivchei Shal Mitzibur. Amri, the Gemara answers like this. There was a chiddush there. And that's why the Mishnah listed it. Sira Shechodashim Itzrichale. The Mishnah had to mention that. Why? Perhaps I would contemplate and think, the reason why the Karbanis Adaycha Tumah, that's because the Torah refers to them as something which is time sensitive. But Mayadechem, etc., as we're going to see in the upcoming Sukkah. And by Rosh Chodesh, we don't find a reference of Mayad, which perhaps indicates that it's not really in the same category as the other time-sensitive Karbanis, and therefore perhaps can't be brought Betumah, Kamash Malon. That's what the Mishnah comes to tell us. The Rosh Chodesh Ikri Mayad. Even a carbon brought on Rosh Chodesh fits the bill, because even Rosh Chodesh is called Mayad. Where do we find the word Mayad in reference to Rosh Chodesh? Kedabai. The Amar Abaye comes to explain why do we consider Tisha B'Av as the time where Klal Yisrael cried when they heard the report from the Meraglim. How does it work out? We know the Meraglim was sent and came back after 40 days. They were sent out on the 29th of Sivan. Says Abaye, very simple calculation. The Amar Abaye, Tammuz Dahayim Shata, the month of Tammuz on that year, Malyua, they filled it. It was a 30-day month. In which case you have a total of 40 days. From 29 Sivan until the 8th of Av, when they return. You have 29 and 30 of Sivan. You have full 30 of Tammuz, because it was a full month, a leap month. That gives you 32. And they came back on the 8th of Av, for a total of 40 days. How do we know that the Tammuz month was a full month? Karlei Mayed. The pasuk says, Karlei Mayed, they called him a Mayed, which is a reference to the Rosh Chodesh, the 30th day of Tammuz, was an extra long month. Lishva Bachuri, to break my Bachurim, to create a day of mourning throughout the generations. It's only because the Tammuz was a 30-day month. It had that added day, that 30th day, which is the first day of Rosh Chodesh, Karlei Mayed, which resulted in the Meraglim returning on the 8th day of, which resulted in Tisha B'Av being the night of crying, and subsequently the night of crying L'Doris. So we see that Mayed is a reference to Rosh Chodesh, and that explains why the carbon of Rosh Chodesh is also considered within this context of Mayed, the time-sensitive carbon, which allows it to be brought even Betumah. Let's make a quick chazar of today's daf. So we learned about a Tarevis Isser, and we have 4 categories. If it was cold into cold, all agree, all you need to do is rinse it off. Hot into hot, we assume it was Beleah, therefore it's Asr. Hot into cold, according to Rav, the upper one prevails, and therefore it's Asr. According to Shmuel, just remove the point of contact. When it's cold into hot, Rav says, just remove the point of contact. Shmuel says it's Asr, because the lower one, Tata, is the one that sets the tone. We learned that something which was excessively salted is deemed to be boiling. We learned about Reach. Rav says, Reach, although it's not the substance, it's still Asr. Levi says, Reich alav milsi, that's not the essence and substance of the Isser, doesn't have to be reckoned with. What about a carbon which has a set time to be brought? That can even be brought Betumah when necessary. But that's only regarding the Akrava. The Achila, that's not allowed when it's Betumah. We have one exception, which is the carbon Pesach, which is primarily brought for the sake of Achila. Therefore, when it's brought Betumah, it is also eaten Betumah. Be well, and all the best. Aksiva v'chasima tayva.